chain.
Worst punishments in human history? Wait a minute.
Probably familiar with a lot of different punishments, from detention to jail time. You might have even heard about barbaric historical sentences, such as hangings, burnings, and stonings. But as dreadful as they were, humans throughout history have come up with even more twisted and terrible ways to punish alleged wrongdoers. From burning bulls to bug buffets.
Everybody knows about the brazen bull, bruh. Chat, y'all know about the brazen bull, bro? Everybody know about the brazen bull.
These are some of the worst punishments in human history.
That's why you say when somebody would say something, the leather sack!
Sacking of Rome. Have you ever been in a cramped spot?
This is the one I be threatening y'all with all the time, dude. I told y'all it was real. I told you!
Sacking of Rome. Have you ever been in a cramped spot with someone you don't like? Maybe shared an elevator with that one annoying coworker? Well, it could always be worse. That annoying coworker could also be an angry, venomous snake. The ancient Roman poena culiae, or punishment of the sack, involved placing the victim into a large canvas sack. At this point, a dog, cat, monkey, rooster, and snake would then also be tossed into the sack, before the sack itself was thrown into a river. The idea behind poena culiae was that as the sack slowly filled with water, the frightened and aggressive animals inside would tear each other and the unfortunate victim stuck in the middle apart.
That's crazy, bro.
The exact animals thrown into the sack varied from punishment to punishment. After all, why waste a perfectly good monkey when you could just use an extra rooster? This nasty punishment was most often meted out to those accused of parricide, which is the crime of slaying one of your parents. I'm not exactly sure.
Imagine they're like, bro, you're like on trial. They're like, okay, we sentence you to the sack. You're like, what? Oh, that don't sound too bad. The sack? Well, it could be worse. I guess they could have killed me. Like a day or two goes by. They wake you up one day. They lead you to a room like, all right, get in. You're like, what's up with this big giant sack? They're like, just get in. They throw a snake, a monkey, a dog, and like a chicken in there. You're like, yo, what's going on? Then they just seal it shut, and all of a sudden you just hear the sack getting thrown into water. And you can't do nothing, bro. Golly.
Sure why slaying your parents would net you a timeout in the danger sack. Doesn't seem like an especially ironic or fitting punishment. Maybe it's funnier if you speak Latin? Either way, this barbaric punishment fell out of style in the 3rd century CE in Rome, only to be reinstated by Emperor Justinian 200 years later, where it remained in use for another 400 years. Definitely redefines the meaning of getting the sack. Scaphism reviews. If you were told you were going to be experiencing the boats in ancient Persia, you might expect a pleasant trip lounging along the Karun River, easily eating dates. In reality, you'd be in for one of the most disgusting experiences imaginable. Devised in the 5th century BCE, Scaphism, also known as the boats, was a punishment that started off sweet. Literally, the victim was fed a large amount of sweet honey and milk or cream, and things got considerably less comfortable after that. If the victim was lucky, they would be tied up inside a boat. If they weren't, they'd be placed inside a boat before another upturned boat was placed on top of them, so that their arms, legs, and head were sticking out. The boats were then pushed into a lake or swamp, and this is where things get nasty. The sickly mixture of milk and honey would eventually cause the victim to vomit or relieve their bowels. In addition to being gross and causing dehydration, the sugary contents of the victim's excretions would also attract insects incredibly quickly. Over the next few days, the victim would slowly starve while their body was consumed inside the boat by flies, maggots, and any other awful swamp creatures you can imagine. If you'd done something really bad, your boat would be pulled back ashore so you could be force-fed more milk and honey to drag out this process even longer.
I do think, though, this is only ever confirmed done to one person.
Plutarch, a Greek essayist, recorded an instance where a Persian soldier killed a nobleman and survived 17 days of scaphism before succumbing to his punishment. Man, and I thought an hour of detention after school was a cruel sentence. Rats.
Oh no.
Throughout human history, wherever people have gathered in large numbers, rats have followed, living in our homes rent-free and eating our delicious trash. It's only fair we put them to work. In modern times, rats are mostly employed as test subjects in scientific research.
Messed up.
But if we jump back a few hundred years, these pernicious pests were proliferators of pain. In the 17th century,
Man, I already know about these. Show me a torture method I don't know.
placed in a cage, which would then...
Why is this one so replayed?
like the ye old equivalent of smart water. Since then, it's been utilized all over the world, from the American Civil War to Spanish inquisitors in the 16th century, who also experimented with forced drinking as punishment. Well, at least they didn't have access to sparkling water.
Man, show me something I don't know.
White light. Our next punishment is known as white torture, or sometimes white terror. To understand white terror, however, we first need to understand solitary confinement. Solitary confinement is a form of punishment frequently used against prisoners today that involves placing them in a small cell devoid of human contact or activities.
Ooh, I might not
In the
know about
United
this
States,
one.
solitary confinement is used to reprimand behavior as major as starting fights, but also as minor as having extra rolls of toilet paper in your cell. Most solitary cells are just 6 by 9 feet in size, smaller
Oh, this is just solitary confinement.
than a standard car. Keep in mind this imprisonment can last for days, weeks, or months,
Man,
resulting
there's something wrong with me, the fact that I know all these. There's something wrong with me. Chad, y'all know about all these? Oh, I don't know. What is this one?
severe feather warning.
Tar and feather. Dude, I know all these, man. I'm about to invent some more. Like, what happened?
An elephant never forgives.
Man, this one, elephant step on them, bruh.
You have to feel bad for elephants. All they really want to do is chill out by the watering hole with their buds. But because they're so big and weird looking, humans have used them for everything from
Hey,
circus
you better take that back. They don't look weird.
performances to weapons of war, and even for executions. The most infamous and well-known employment of elephant
Yeah, it's when they put the head on the block and they step on the head.
executioners comes from medieval India
I
and was
know all
known as
these.
Gunga Rao. If you consider that an Asian elephant typically weighs around 8,800 pounds, as much as 9 grand pianos, it doesn't take long to figure out how they could be used to end a life. Gunga Rao involved the victim placing their head on a wooden stake, as an elephant was slowly marched towards them before squishing the life out of them with their enormous feet. Gunga Rao was not employed conservatively and was the punishment of choice for everything from thievery to tax evasion. This is perhaps
Tax evasion.
why it captured the imaginations of medieval travelers to India, though elephantine executions actually dated back to the classical era.
What did you just say? Case, you could only eat one cereal for the rest of your life, what would it be? Fruity Pebbles, not gonna lie. Not gonna lie, Fruity Pebbles. I'm gonna keep it a stack with you. One cereal for the rest of my life? Like, for the rest of my life, every time I eat cereal, it has to be one flavor? I would probably go Fruity Pebbles for real. No joke. It's between two. It's between Fruity Pebbles and Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Not gonna lie. It's close, though.
Love,
I already
interior,
know all
the
the torture.